Lawyer. Your reporter Owen Kingsley spent the day in the courtroom as well. He's joining us live right outside Rockville Superior Court with more tonight. Owen?
Well, Michelle Troconis is on the list of possible witnesses, but she herself still has not yet taken the stand. Now, for much of the day today, prosecutors cross-examined her key witness and also questioned his credibility. This hearing is focused on Michelle Troconis' former attorney, Andrew Bowman, and his initial legal advice. Bowman recommended Troconis speak to police, which she did 3 times. Troconis' words in those interviews were used against her at trial, and she claims Bowman's recommendation led to her conviction. Bowman defended his advice last Friday. On the same day, Troconis' expert witness attorney, Michael Fitzpatrick, testified that Bowman's recommendation to speak to police was incompetent. Today, prosecutors questioned his credibility, focusing on allegations his former clients have made about ineffective counsel, as well as inconsistencies in his previous answers when asked how many cases he's been involved with in his 40-year career.
The answers that I gave in those other cases, those were approximations. I used the word about. I used the word estimate. I was asked for estimates. Nobody ever said to me that my credibility was going to hang on whether it was, 20 or 22 or 900 or 1,000.
Now, prosecutors also brought up several examples of times when Fitzpatrick actually praised Bowman for his work as an attorney. Right now, still unclear whether or not Troconis plans to take the stand. Your reporter, live in Rockville, I'm Owen Kingsley, Channel 3 Eyewitness News.
Owen, thank you. In Waterbury,